So I posted a video sharing my law firm's income during its first 5 years. And while that video had such great feedback, which I'm very appreciative of, there's one part in that video that a lot of people have reached out on. Why my law firm is coming to an end. Not in the immediate future, but I've decided that the countdown has begun. I'm just going to tease that for now. So in this video, we're going to talk about the end of my law firm and why I'm kind of excited about that. First things first, there's a quote that I want to read to you that I think is really starting to determine my trajectory and my outlook at this stage in my life. The reason to win the game is so you can be free of it. I love this quote so much that it's going to be a recurring theme throughout this video. Let's just internalize the idea that the ultimate goal in my mind for my specific situation is freedom. I know that's very patriotic of me, but let's just keep that in the back of our mind. Okay, so perspective on my journey and thought process here. In order to fully appreciate how fortunate of a situation I'm in, I'll be the first to acknowledge it. It's a good problem to have. You need to, one, check out the video that was sliding above. You can see this and get a sense of my law firm's revenue in its first 5 years. And two, check out the video about my case expenses for my law firm. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to put together that my profit margin has been fantastic. I'm a one-man shop, run a law firm from the comfort of my home. Profit margin has been great. But as a result of a great problem, those profits have been pushing me towards a fork in the road where I now have 3 options ahead of me. I'm not quite there on making the first initial step, but it's coming. So option 1 on this fork in the road is just staying small. Keep doing what I'm doing until the wheels fall off. Pros and cons with both. We'll talk about that. Option 2, screw being small. Let's scale this bad boy. Let's grow this law firm. Let's take these profits on such great margins and let's put it back in the business and let's grow. Pros and cons of both. Option 3, which is going to be specifically unique to me, but you can plug and play whatever you want if you're trying to analyze for yourself here. For me in particular, option 3 is transitioning full-time into law venture. For you, that may be another passion project that you have. That may be something else that you want to pursue in life. That may be whatever investments you maybe want to focus on. Option 3 for me is just full-time law venture. What am I going to do? For those who just want conclusions, I'm just going to go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off on that because this video is all about showing my work. The conclusion is that I'm implementing a strategy to ultimately transition full-time into law venture. For you to be able to understand my thought process here, there are basically 3 stages that we need to cover. Stage 1, survival. Stage 2, comfort. And stage 3, playing a new game. So let's talk about stage 1, survival. And I'm already smiling because this one messes with your head and it's trippy. That's the only word that comes to mind is trippy.
Survive!
So for perspective, when I started my law firm and I went solo in 2019, I was only 3 years into my legal career. So still relatively a baby lawyer. But what I had was a great network that I had built over that 3-year time period. What I didn't have was a lot of money in the bank. I had very little money in the bank, and I had student loans that needed to be paid. I had, expenses that needed to be paid. But fortunately, I didn't have golden handcuffs. I wasn't making much money the years prior, so I didn't even have handcuffs at all. That was a saving grace between that and the network that I had. It was fantastic. But what I did not anticipate was a pandemic.
Don't go out tonight, 'cause you probably won't die. There's Corona on the rise.
And that just added to the stress because I went solo in August, September of 2019. And then very quickly in 2020, we are in pandemic mode. That in the long run ended up being a blessing because that forced my hand in starting a virtual law firm. But in the short term, that was scary. And as a result of that fear, the highs of having a growing law firm during that stage was like nothing else. It felt incredible. It was flat out addictive. And it was because each good thing that happened in my law firm was triple validating. For example, if I settled a case that resulted in me getting even $5,000 of attorney's fees, the triple validating was, okay, I'm a good lawyer. Because keep in mind, I'm on year 3 or 4 at this point in time. So, okay, I'm validated as a lawyer. I'm a good lawyer. Second, I have a good business. Okay, validation there. And then the third, I can pay bills. Oh my goodness, I'm a contributing member of society. So the wins, even the smallest wins at that point in time, were just put it in my veins because the highs, ooh.
Is this real life?
That's not real life. It's just not a sustainable feeling because even though small wins were such great highs, what that ended up doing was distorting reality for me. And the reality is that this job has negativity that will put your peace in jeopardy almost every single day, if not every single day. That negativity could be a difficult adjuster, a defense lawyer that is projecting their issues onto you, maybe a struggling client that is just wanting you to solve all their problems, even beyond the personal injury case that you're handling, just the pressure of litigation, maybe a bad judge that's giving you a hard time, deadlines you got to hit. You know the negativity, if you're a personal injury lawyer, that comes standard with this job. The issue during this survival stage is when every win, no matter how small, is overinflated into a major win and you get that hit of dopamine, then the negativity isn't that big of a deal. You're trying to just prove, at least I was, that I'm a good lawyer, that I have a good law firm, I have a good business, and that I can pay the bills. And so when money was coming in, the negativity, it wasn't that loud. It wasn't bothering me at all. But then a shift starts to happen as you get more comfortable. And this takes us to stage 2. So I can't tell you when I entered stage 2 involving comfort, but I know when I got there. It was just something where my mind shift started taking place with the association between positivity and negativity. In particular, that triple validation started to fade and the highs were not nearly as high as they were during the survival stage. Because at some point, I had the track record to where I no longer felt like I needed to prove to myself or have approval from other people that I'm a good lawyer. I've been able to have great outcomes on cases that I'm very proud to have great outcomes on. And as a result of one of the 3 validations that I needed during stage 1, that meant that the smaller wins weren't hitting like they used to. And the negativity on the other side started being a little bit louder. And those were unfortunately hitting a little bit more than stage 1. And then let's talk about the other validation, which was, okay, I have a good business. I have a law firm that can survive. I'll be honest with you. Coming out of a pandemic with a growing law firm where revenue was on the up and up, that's all the confidence that any business needs in order to understand that it is a viable business. As a result of that and seeing the increase in attorney's fees generated, I no longer needed the validation that I have a good business model, that this virtual law firm thing can work, and that I'm going to be able to keep the law firm growing. That validation, that need for validation started going away. And again, as a result, those highs weren't hitting like they used to. And the third aspect, which was personal, which was like, okay, now I have money in order to keep the lights on, in order to pay the mortgage, in order to pay for my student loans. That started to no longer hit as well. You can see the theme here, because as the profit margin started increasing for the law firm, I started passing more money to myself. Student loans got paid, car got paid, money started being saved. And at some point you see, okay, I can survive 3 months. I can survive 6 months. I can survive a year with no new cases. I can survive 2 years with no, all of that kept growing. And that started making me more comfortable to where it's like, okay, now I'm good. Now I feel safe. But then the negativity that has been persistent throughout, that started to become louder and louder. I mean, I hate to say this, but it's 100% true. If negativity is oil and your peace is water, one drop of negativity can contaminate the entire pool of peace. So I hope you can understand what I'm trying to ultimately illustrate during stage 2 of comfort, which is there's a negativity problem that needs consideration during this stage. At what point in your wealth journey does the negativity that is inherent with the job become not worth it? Yes, I understand that being a PI lawyer, having your own law firm allows you to affect change and affect positive outcomes for people who wouldn't have been able to fight the good fight by themselves. Like, I understand all that. But at some point financially, you hit a threshold to where you start asking, is this worth it? Reframe it differently. How much do you value your peace? Think of it that way. What price is your peace? As PI lawyers, we often argue on behalf of other people how much pain and suffering is worth, how much impairment's worth, how much inconvenience is worth, how much mental anguish is worth, how much loss of enjoyment of life is worth. In our situation, doing what we do, how much do we value peace? And as a result, what is that value we're trying to achieve? And if we achieve it, are we willing to protect our peace versus enduring? Stage 3, playing a new game. And what I mean by this is at some point I started to try and dabble with the transition of scaling my law firm. I hired my first employee. I started kind of going down the mindset of, okay, what do I need to do in order to grow this bad boy to be as big as possible for world domination? But then I found myself dipping my toes further and further into the scaling game plan and then pulling my toes back out like it was a cold plunge and not liking it. I started having a little bit of an identity crisis over that because it's like, this is the goal. Like, the goal was to grow. The goal is to make as large of an impact that I can make. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And then I read The Psychology of Money. Great book, by the way. But there's a specific quote that I want to read to you. Money's greatest intrinsic value, and this can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time. Doing something you love on a schedule you can't control can feel the same as doing something you hate. Cash is the oxygen of independence. This quote was so on point for what I was dealing with in my professional life. I was experiencing success, meaning I had more clients than ever, and it was a growing business, and it was all word of mouth. Profit margin is going up and up and up, but I was getting busier. So I scaled to one employee beyond me, and I was sending some of my workload to her, but now I also had an employee to manage. And guess what? I was still growing. And as a result, I was still busy. And that freedom that I've been trying to hold on to, I realized I didn't have anymore. So the success of growth very quickly turned into having less and less freedom. For example, at some point, I was like, you know what? I have so many travel points that I would just want to go to Europe for like a month and just enjoy Europe. And I looked at my calendar, it's like trial setting. mediation setting, deposition setting, and all these dates and deadlines and things that I had to hit for every month of the year. And it's like, I can't do that. I started to realize like, okay, this is an issue. So not only did I lose my freedom in order to control my schedule, but I also lost the ability to enjoy a win. When your schedule is pretty nonstop, you're just on to the next thing, on to the next fight, on to the next resistance point. And whenever you stack up wins along the way, you just don't have that moment to just sit with it, experience it, celebrate it. And it's something to where, as a result, you miss out on the depth of enjoyment that you should be getting in order to make sure you're getting the most out of this profession. For example, early January 2025, I got a massive, massive win that 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been shouting from the rooftops about that win. But when the win occurred, it was, oh, I have a deadline tomorrow that I have to hit. Okay, now I have to go take a deposition. Oh, now I'm on a different case in front of a judge arguing a motion that I should win, but surprise, surprise, I don't win. Now I'm upset about that loss. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. And then at some point on the weekend, you're like, didn't I just win this one case, or didn't this just happen? I haven't taken any time to appreciate that. So by getting too successful to where you are way too busy, not only did I find myself losing freedom, but I was losing the passion that can be sparked by the wins. And the wins, like I said earlier, they weren't hitting like they used to, because now it's on to the next thing. It's on to the next thing. And then as I've been scaling the cases, negativity gets scaled with that. With stage 2, we talked about the negativity problem. With stage 3, what we're talking about now is a time problem. I was spending too much of my time trying to achieve all the things. And as a result, I was beginning to burn out. There are 2 possible solutions to the time problem that I want to go a little bit deeper on. The first solution is you stay lean and mean. You basically go back to stage 2. You say, I'm going to have a small law firm. We're going to have strict boundaries on our workload, and we're going to have great profit margins. And as a result, those profits, or a good chunk of them, I'm just going to park in my nest egg personally, and we're just going to go from there. The issue is, if I do that, I'm going to run into the negativity problem as well, because, okay, that just means I'm extending the situation where, yes, I'm making great money and the nest egg is growing and growing, but I'm also dealing with the issue of now I'm getting more comfortable, and now I'm starting to ask myself again, is the negativity worth it? Which is a great problem to have, because that means you put yourself in a situation to have the freedom to leave the game. But you're just going to have to keep revisiting that decision and that freedom as you stick with the lean and mean approach. At least that's my mindset. Option 2 is scaling. And in doing so, you're going to have a different kind of problem. Scaling fixes the time problem where you're spread too thin, but it introduces a new problem. The best way I can give you my new philosophy on risk is reading another passage out of the Psychology of Money book that, honestly, I've been gifting it to a lot of people. I don't even have it anymore because I lent it to a friend and haven't gotten it back yet. Definitely something to check out. I'll link it down below if you're interested. But the particular passage here is getting money and keeping money are 2 different skills. Getting money requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risk. It requires humility and fear that what you've made can be taken away from you just as fast. It requires frugality and an acceptance that at least some of what you've made is attributable to luck. So past success can't be relied upon to repeat indefinitely. I think this perspective is so important because I recognize that my approach with getting to this point using a lean and mean virtual law firm has been a great vehicle for making money. But at some point, a shift needs to happen to where I'm starting to protect the money that I've made. And when that shift occurs, so does the business mindset and model. There's a great quote that is something that I think everybody should internalize. It's things that have never happened before happen all the time. I experienced this as an investor when I was in college. I went home for spring break back in, I think it was 2011. And I had a little bit of money that I wanted to put into the stock market. I had been dabbling here and there for years. And there was some money that I was like, you know what? I want this to be a long-term investment. I'm going to invest in nuclear energy. Hand to God, 2 days later, the Fukushima disaster occurred and nuclear plummeted. That money essentially evaporated like that, which then takes us back to that quote. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. I use this example to help illustrate the fact that I learned very early on that there are just things that I can't anticipate. And I'm not egotistical enough to think that I'm immune to making a bad judgment call, a bad decision, and that potentially things can go wrong with a business at any point in time. The question is, if things go wrong with the business, what's my backstop? How much is at risk if things go wrong? And scaling not only increases the upside, but it also increases the risk. The profit margin that I was talking about earlier with my virtual law firm being lean and mean, that may evaporate pretty quickly with scaling a business because the expenses are going to go up. More employees means more wages, means more benefits, means office supplies, means office tools like law firm management software, means office space. By the way, I am of the opinion that at some point, at a certain amount of employees or certain size of your law firm, you're going to have to get them in person because virtual just at scale isn't going to be ideal. Marketing, a lot of money is going to have to go towards marketing, and then you're going to have to manage all these employees as well. Those are financial and time expenses that go into scaling. The risks as a result is that law firms, in my mind, I think I can objectively say this, they don't scale well. Here's an example to kind of compare and contrast. If I were to have today, solo operation, if I were to have 100 new clients just call me all at once in order to sign up, I wouldn't be able to manage it. It'd be a great problem to have, but 100 new clients, too much for me to take at one time. So in that situation, it's like, okay, I have to scale because this is a service industry and I need somebody to provide a service to this client. So as a result, I need other people to help. Contrast that with the ease of scalability with Law Venture, for example. A video gets posted, 1 million people can see it. A course gets created and the 100 people problem is as simple as you got 100 people buying the same exact thing, not too much of an issue. If I have 100 clients that I'm signing up and as a result having to bring on extra hands to help, again, wages, benefits, office supplies, all that goes up. And then there's the issue with turnover. Like a law firm in an ideal situation is perfect equilibrium, right? Balance the scales. But let's say somebody has 30 clients that they are pushing cases on. Let's say they leave for whatever reason, something that's outside of your control. What happens to those 30 clients? Well, they got to go somewhere. Well, somebody else is at maximum capacity because they have their 30 clients. So do you just split that up evenly? Or do you have to then take time out of your day in order to go hire somebody else to then be trained to take care of the 30 clients? In that situation, at some point, turnover starts becoming this equilibrium balance that you're walking a tightrope on. And that was something that I experienced whenever I just had my one employee. When she left, her workload fell on me when I had a full workload already and I didn't have the time in order to start trying to hire a replacement. I just grit my teeth and hated life for however long I needed to hate it in order to get through that process. Now, maybe there is a point where if you scale large enough, if somebody leaves, then you can thin out the workload so nobody's going to be tipping the scale too much on their individual workload. But that is a long process to get to. Other risks that are outside of your control. The law can change. Any med mal Texas lawyer that was practicing in 1990s, they'll tell you how that shook things up. Judges can change. Sometimes you have a very plaintiff-friendly judge who then gets replaced by somebody who's not so plaintiff-friendly, and the dynamic changed, and as a result, those cases aren't worth what they were when you have a friendlier judge. And then you're also dealing with like increased risk of malpractice, because now there are more people that are outside of your control and more problems can go wrong. All of this, to some degree, is outside of your control, like a tsunami hitting Fukushima. And I've thought of the benefits of scaling, but when I think a step further or two, I also think these quote benefits are just hidden risks that are a ticking time bomb. For example, if you scale in order to have less on your plate, you start delegating more, the risk behind the scenes that may be a ticking time bomb is you're no longer the face of the case. So whenever I get a word of mouth referral, it's because I'm the lawyer that handled the case and got the good resolution from that potential referral source. If I'm no longer the face, let's say I hire an associate who then ends up being the face from beginning to end, and that person goes and starts their own law firm, similar to what I did, that previous client isn't going to call me who they've never spoken with, or maybe they talked to me one time. They're going to reach out to that associate who handled the case the way they wanted the associate to handle the case in order to replicate the previous success, or send friends or family in order to replicate the previous success. So that just seems like a ticking time bomb to be more removed. Plus, you got to factor in the time that's going to be spent towards like managing this whole thing. And then the second benefit that I think I hear fairly often is like, well, at some point as you grow your law firm, you get to choose your cases. And I get that, but I just don't like that. Because if I start choosing cases that are higher value, then I think as a result, I start losing touch with smaller cases and maximizing value. I just can't foresee a situation where an associate who's a salaried employee decides to really do extra work beyond what the case requires in order to maybe turn a case into higher value. And the reason why I say this is because recently I've been turning my UM/UIM cases into bad faith cases that just started paying out. And I've shared my UM/UIM strategies in the law venture community that we'll link above, and I'll provide it down below. But I had one case where the initial offer was like $50,000 for like the husband, and then a little bit more money for the wife. And then I ended up getting their $250,000 in UM benefits each. And then I flipped that into some additional money and then turned that into another $400,000 in bad faith. So collectively, it was almost $1 million case. Like, I mean, it was just shy of $1 million. And that bad faith $400,000 whopper, that wouldn't have happened otherwise had I not had my finger on the pulse of how the law has been shifting in Texas. And so in that scenario, that's a case that may not have hit my radar if I was only taking, $1 million cases on my docket and everything else was going to an associate who was just trying to get things pushed through. So I have a hard time being okay with not maximizing cases because I think clients deserve that. But I don't see that practically happening when you have maybe a salaried employee who just isn't motivated to that level. And frankly, if they were motivated to that level, they're probably not staying an employee very long. They're probably going solo fairly quickly like I did. So the risk with scaling kind of blows my mind a little bit, and it makes me extremely uncomfortable because you have to offset the risk with more risk. Hear me out on this one. For example, if you need more revenue in order to keep paying expenses, in order to keep whatever trajectory so you can keep scaling, then you need potentially, let's say, higher quality cases. But that means you have to increase your expenses, for example, like with marketing, because you have competition of other lawyers and law firms that also want high quality cases.
those are harder to get. So you have to be able to stand out from the crowd. And sometimes it just takes more money to be able to do that. So in order to get more money, you got to spend more money in order to get more money. And then in order to get more money, you got to spend more money. You get the point. Or the alternative approach to offsetting risk with more risk is trying to get higher quantity cases. But again, law firms don't scale at a safe level. If you have more cases, you need more people working for you. And that just increases the risk with everything that we were talking about earlier between wages, office supplies, office space, benefits, turnover. All of that just adds to the equation of risk. Do you know what's wild is I haven't even talked about the one risk factor that can nuke everything. And it's something that I wanted to save until the end because this is something that I don't think we focus on enough as lawyers. The biggest risk factor is bad health. If I'm in bad health, then wealth becomes irrelevant because I can't even spend it, or it takes a nosedive because I have to spend it. I don't know if you've ever seen the chart where it talks about the health and wealth aspects, but I'll sum it up here. In our youth, in most people's situation, they have an abundance of health and very little wealth. But over time, as you age, your health starts to decline, part of the natural process of aging. And over time, if you're putting some money away here and there, you're furthering your career, your wealth starts to increase as your health starts to decrease. And at some point, there's an intersection where all of a sudden, for the first time in your life, you don't really know the specific point, but at some point you have more wealth than you have health. And I think at this point in my life, I'm starting to plan for that moment. All the risks that we've talked about, all the stress that I've mentioned, and the potential upside or downside of choosing each particular career choice on that fork in the road that I'm approaching. All of that has to go towards not only wealth, but also a massive consideration of health. In fact, I've started wearing a Whoop in order to track my recovery, in order to track my strain. And it really opened up my eyes to the fact that, yeah, my recovery was garbage. I wasn't getting good quality sleep. I definitely wasn't getting enough REM sleep. By the way, if I can give Whoop a shout out here, sleeping is one thing, but apparently quality sleep is something totally different. And I didn't realize, okay, yeah, maybe my eyes are closed for a period of time, but maybe not much is going on that should probably be going on. For example, a lot of mental activity during the day, which is pretty common for us lawyers, requires a lot of REM sleep. And your REM sleep can be affected by so many things negatively. So maybe learn a little bit about your health in order to figure out what you need, because I've started to dial this in after 9 months, and my sleep, while it's not always great, has been a lot better and more consistent than it was 9 months ago. All that is relative to my stress level and strain that I've also been tracking. I'm also spending money going to therapy about once a week in order to focus on mental health as well, and starting to just ultimately shift that dynamic of what I'm prioritizing. Because again, the question is, how much do I value my peace? As a result of this lifestyle change, this fork in the road where I'm starting to turn away from the option of keeping status quo, of lean and mean law firm, turning away the idea of scaling my law firm, but starting to focus more on transitioning towards law venture. What I'm doing now, it's pretty simple. I'm saying no to a lot more cases. My caseload trajectory went from going like this to now it's going to start going down. And I have cases that'll probably keep me busy for a while that are active cases. And I'm focused on maximizing those as much as possible. Some of them pretty big hitters, so fingers are crossed. And then as that caseload starts going down further and further, and I get some more free time, starting to dive deeper into law venture and transitioning that lifestyle a little bit more. And that's the dream. Talked about the Naval quote to start things. Let's recap it here. The goal is to win the game so that you have the freedom to choose to leave it, or something like that. And I want this video to be very, very clear. leaving the game doesn't mean you didn't enjoy the game. Leaving the game doesn't mean in this situation that you shouldn't start a law firm. It's the opposite. Starting a virtual law firm in 2019 was the best decision of my life because it is now putting me on the path of being able to have the freedom of choice on which of those three options I want to choose instead of being forced down a path that may not be ideal for health and wealth as I enter this next stage of life. So my hope is for those watching, you can see the work, I'm showing my work, and you can ultimately determine the conclusion that's best for you. But if you're in the beginning stages, I don't want it to be like, well, Jarrett didn't keep his law firm up and running for 10 years. And why would I want to do something like that? It's to have the choice. Because if you, based on your specific situation and your skill set, decide, yeah, I have a good risk tolerance with scaling, let's do it. Like scaling a law firm isn't anything new. There are plenty of law firms that are just massive in size. I'm not knocking them. To each their own. It's just not for my risk tolerance. And also people have different levels of like what fuels them and what drives them. For example, if just being a lawyer and helping people gives you that high and it really silences the negativity, to each their own. Everything's going to be subjective, but I ask that you just show your own work in deciding what's going to be best for you.